valid. Boom.
Think we can
This
go
is
one
actually
more?
a lot of fun.
Preteens, this is Matt.
This is Connor. What's up?
We're so excited to dive into day 5 of our Easter Devos.
Day 4 of our Easter video.
Darn it!
Don't worry about it. Here we go.
Welcome to the Jelly Telly 5-Minute Family
That closing
Devotional.
eye gets me every
I
time.
know.
Let's learn about Easter week.
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
God protects his people.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yep.
Today's verse is Exodus 12, 26 and 27. And when your children say to you, "What do you mean by the service?" you shall say, "It is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover. For he passed over the houses of the people of Israel in Egypt, when he struck the Egyptians, but spared our houses." And the people bowed their heads and worshipped.
Pharaoh still wouldn't let them go, so God had to do something very serious.
Ooh, do you see in the back? It says A is for Abraham, B is for Babel. What do you think? C is for Cain, but that would be before
That
Babel.
would be, yeah, I can't tell.
don't know.
It's like grainy.
Remember about the
Oh,
Egyptians
the focus
drowning
is
the
like on
Hebrew baby boys? Well, sometimes bad things you do have a way of coming back to you. The final
that the truth?
plague was the death of Egypt's firstborn sons. It was terribly sad, but it finally convinced Pharaoh to let the children of Israel go.
You know, one of the things that I love about this story, right? So Israelites have been enslaved in Egypt for 400 years.
Yeah,
like
that's a lot
that's
of time.
no joke, right? But then, after like the dramatic way God saves them, the 10 plagues. This, of course, being a reference to the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn son, and the instructions of what God gave the Israelites to do. Hey, you paint the blood of a 1-year-old lamb on your doorposts, right? So that the angel would pass over. Like, this picture of God saving his people kind of becomes the standard throughout the Old Testament of God will save you like he saved the Israelites. Like, this is like God's opening act, right? The curtain has opened, right? Like, if creation is sort of the prologue, this is the end of Act 1. God is doing his incredible work of salvation, and we all get to see, oh wow, God is a savior.
Yeah, it's awesome.
To protect their own sons from the final plague, God told the Israelites to sacrifice a spotless lamb, a lamb without flaw, and put the blood on the doorposts of their homes. The angel that brought death to the Egyptian sons saw the blood on the doorposts and passed over the Israelite homes. Jewish people celebrate this miraculous part of God's rescue plan each year with a festival called Passover.
Preteens, this reminds me when John the Baptist is baptizing Jesus and he sees Jesus from far and he says, "Look, there's the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." That Jesus is our Passover lamb, that we don't deserve the angel of death to pass over us. We deserve to die and be separated from God because of our sin. But Jesus died on the cross and spilt his blood for us, that when we trust and believe in him, his blood covers us and saves us from all our sin. This is what this passage is ultimately pointing to and ultimately about. Wouldn't you agree, Connor?
Oh, for sure. And you know, there are a couple of connections. Some are easier to see and some are harder. One, as Jelly Telly mentioned, is that the lamb had to be spotless, which meant that the lamb couldn't have any diseases or anything like that. It had to be a healthy lamb. And Jesus, of course, was the spotless sacrifice for us. Never sinned once in his life. And whenever he died, he could pay that price that we could never pay. Another interesting little factoid, if you're reading in the book of Exodus, the branch that they use to paint the blood on their doorpost is a hyssop branch, which, if you go to the Gospels, whenever they take that sponge and they fill it with that really sour, nasty taste and stuff that they give to Jesus on the cross whenever he says, "I'm thirsty," they stick that on a hyssop branch and then lift it up to his mouth. I just think the connections there are just incredible.
I know, absolutely. And preteens, it just reminds me of the fact of just that God's timing is perfect. That when he bled and died on the cross, that was on Passover. And so the connections are there like crazy.
Yeah, and you mentioning God's timing, right? When Jesus ate with his disciples, it was the Last Supper. That was the Passover meal. So stay tuned because we've got a little bit more of that coming. It's going to be exciting.
Absolutely.
Let's review today's verse. Exodus 12, 26 and
I'm used to
27.
the
You're not
rocking
dizzy
now.
anymore?
No.
Okay,
Say
good.
to you, what do you mean by the service? You shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover.
I'm gonna pause here real quick. So in Exodus chapter 12, right, what God is instructing the Israelites is when your children ask you, why are you celebrating this feast? Why do we celebrate this every year? Then you as the parent get to tell the kid, hey, it's the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover.
That's right.
Right? He saved us in Egypt. So it's one of those things where this is why they kept celebrating it, right?
Yeah.
As God's instructions weren't just to do it and then, okay, cool, but it was to remember it, to remember what God had done.
And parents, as you're watching this with your preteen, you can say, this is why we take the Lord's Supper as followers of Jesus. This is why we get baptized, since that's the very first thing we do after we come to know Jesus. And so those are some ways that you can disciple and pour into your preteens and your kids.
For he passed over the houses of the people of Israel in Egypt, when he struck the Egyptians, but spared our houses. And the people bowed their heads and worshipped.
All right, preteens, so some questions to ask yourself is, how does the Passover connect the Old Testament with the New Testament? And how can you use the story of Passover to share the gospel with your friends?
Yeah, so take a moment, talk through those questions with your family. All right, preteens, now we have a chance to pray. First, take a moment and just thank Jesus that he is our Passover lamb, that spotless, perfect sacrifice to cover our sin, to cover our shame. We don't have to feel it anymore. That shame, that guilt, it's all gone. Jesus paid for all of it. And the second thing is, today is Wednesday, right? You got Good Friday service coming up in 2 days, and 2 days after that, we have Easter Sunday. So ask the Lord to give you some ideas about some people who you can invite, maybe from school, your sport teams, art class, something, so they get to hear the gospel for themselves.
Preteens, we'll see you tomorrow.